Okay. Let's get back to mitzvah Nun Zayin. The Rambam has a separate mitzvah in Minyan HaMitzvos called Pesach Sheni. And the Rambam asked on himself that l'cheira, one should have counted this as one mitzvah, Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni, for the simple reason that it's like Shorish Shvi, that you have the option of doing a mitzvah in two different ways or two different times. In Karban you can do it in different ways, and the Rambam assumes the same thing, doing it different times. And so why, he asked himself, why do I count it as two mitzvahs? It should have been one mitzvah. The simple answer is that it's Machukas Tanoim. And according to some, you could imagine that it really is one mitzvah. But according to the Tana, who we paskin like, it's really two mitzvahs, not doing the same mitzvah at two different times, but it's two separate mitzvahs. And let's just try to do this, and we'll see exactly we do it. Okay. The line goes like this. Mo psochim amru chayiv koris al tzadi gimel aman aleph. So we started a little bit before. He asked the kasha, v'yomu elai, loma ze timne Pesach Sheni, v'ze seisa ma shekdamto b'shorish hashvi, v'omucho shedina mitzvah lo yimne mitzvah b'fnei atzmo. So that various dinim, various permutations of the mitzvah are not counted as separate mitzvahs. Yeda Makshe, the Ram is having like an imaginary dialogue with someone asking a question. Yeda Makshe kushizu sha'achomim kvar cholku b'Pesach Sheni im yeh dinoi kedin Pesach Rishon. If it's dino kedin Pesach Rishon, then really it's really one mitzvah, and the kasha is in place, and he's right. Oh, hutzivui nemala ba'atzmo. It's a separate commandment. So he says, "The posca halacha shutzivui nema ba'atzmo." It's a separate tzivui. It's not a permutation of Pesach Rishon, or that you have another time to mekayim Pesach Rishon. So that is the answer. It's a machukas tanoim. Basically, I don't know if I mentioned it, probably mentioned last time. Ramban says that what mitzvahs in the minyan mitzvahs might be machukas tanoim, and he's bothered by that. Well, the Gemara never says, and according to this Tana, how do you mashlim tayag mitzvahs? But l'chayr, it comes out, the Ram is very clear that there's a machukas tanoim, where the Pesach Sheni is a separate mitzvah, minyan mitzvah not. Then he goes like this. I'm going to try to do this fast, I hope. Ugmo psochim omru chayiv koris al rishon v'chayiv koris al sheni divrei Rebbe. There's a separate chayiv koris on rishon and sheni. Okay? So one was shoygig on rishon and mezin on sheni, is chayiv koris, according to Rebbe. Rab Nosson oimer chayiv koris al rishon upota al sheni. The whole chayiv koris, according to Rab Nosson, was only falling with Pesach Rishon. Rabbi Chanina ben Akiva oimer af al rishon eino chayiv koris elingikein loy also as sheni. So according to Rab Nosson, the only way you chayiv koris is if you don't do you're mazid al rishon, and you don't do Pesach Sheni. You don't have to that question of whether you're sure you're mazid on Pesach Sheni. You don't do Pesach Sheni. V'shal atalmud v'omer, Michael miflegei. What is the machlokes Rebbe and Chacham? Rebbe and Rav Nosson and Chanina ben Akiva. Yeah. Rebbe Soba Sheni regel b'fnei atzmohu, and that it's according to Ram. That's the guiding light. Regel b'fnei atzmohu means a separate mitzvah. It's completely independent. There's nothing to do with Pesach Rishon. For Rabbi Nosson Soba Sheni tashlumin rishon. So if it's tashlumin, it's not a separate mitzvah. It's a way to mekayim the old mitzvah. Hine kvar yizboye masher amaznu elov, that you see in this the idea of tashlumin and the whole thing. This is really the answer to the question. His boy masher amaznu elov, that there's a machlokes tanoim where the Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni are two mitzvahs or one mitzvah. V'sham amru, and he continues talking about the Gemara. Is it bezeh or bezeh that you amaze it both in Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni? Kloima lo hikah Pesach Rishon v'lo Pesach Sheni bezodon, which is really what he mentioned before. Divrei hakol chayiv. Doesn't say how many chayiv occurs, but he said the chayiv occurs. If you amaze it in both, you didn't bring Korban Pesach at all, and you were aware of the chiyuv and you were chayiv and didn't fulfill your obligation, and in both of them you suddenly chayiv according to everyone. Shogeg b'zeh b'zeh divrei hakol potter, because there's not the chayiv koris. You won't amaze it. Hizid b'rishon v'shogeg b'sheni. This is interesting. L'Rebbe Nosson chayiv. Which is an amazing thing. Rav Nosson Yechayev, even though the Ram said before that Rav Nosson saw Sheni Tashlumin Rishon. It's a Tashlumin. It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to mark of the Korban Pesach again. But if you amaze it, you chayiv koris for the Rishon. He's in Berishon v'shogeg b'sheni. We'll have to go over this again. L'Rebbe Rabbi Nosson chayiv, u'Reb Chanina ben Akiva potter, because according to Chanina ben Akiva, the tashlumin pat is the chayiv koris. V'chein kishehiz in Berishon v'hikev b'sheni. Uchayiv the Rebbe. So once I made a mistake. Sorry. His it Berishon v'shogeg b'sheni. He was makiv. He was amazed. He wasn't makiv a Korban Pesach at all. But in Pesach Rishon he was amazed, and in Pesach Sheni he was a shogeg. So according to Rabbi Nosson, you chayiv, because the best it is tashlumin. And you had a chiyuv from Pesach Rishon. Pesach Rishon is a mechayiv. According to Rab Nosson, I see according to Chanina ben Akiva, he's potter, because the tashlumin part is the chiyuv koros, and if he's not only participate, sorry. Rabbi Nosson chayiv Rabbi Chanina ben Akiva potter, because it's the tashlumin is an amazing thing. The tashlumin, the fact that the Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni is all one mitzvah, and the only way you can be chayiv is if you were hizid in the Rishon and the Sheni. I guess we'll see about this, okay? Because Sheni hizid b'Rishon, v'hikriv b'Sheni, chayiv the Rebbe. If he's makriv the tashlumin, that part is according to Rab Nosson and according to Rab Chanina ben Akiva. But you don't even need a p'tur. But according to Rebbe, since it's two separate chiyuvim, the Pesach Sheni doesn't part. The fidat shedatoi ein hasheni tashlumin rishon. It's not tashlumin. It's a separate mitzvah. Va'alocha bezeh kula kerebbe. And we pass like Rebbe. It's a separate mitzvah. Zeis ha-mitzvah ein anosh chayeves bezeh v'chule. Shekvar yisboyer she'aisha b'sheni rishus. And there's a difference in Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni whether Nosha Machayev. And according to and we paskin that it's rishus. In Pesach Rishon she's chayev. Kvar yisboyer mishmeli mishazu mimos sof. Now, what I like to do is to go through and discuss this, okay? Now, lo hikiv Pesach Rishon v'lo Pesach Sheni b'zodon diva kol chayiv. Okay? The Shitas Rab Chanina ben Akiva, Pesach Rishon, Pesach Sheni is one chiyuv, l'hol b'korban. That's what we mentioned before. Since it's one obligation, so the only way you can be chayiv koles is lo hikiv Pesach Rishon v'lo Sheni b'zodon. It's one obligation. It's one conglomerate. Im lo hevi a korban mezid, so a heim Rishon is chayiv koles. Hizid b'Rishon, but hizid. So therefore, but according to Chinim Akiva, if it's hizid b'Rishon v'shogeg b'Sheni, he's potter because it's one obligation, and he wasn't mazed in the whole thing. According to Rabbi Nosson, the Pesach Sheni is tashlum l'Rishon, Pesach Rishon. So if it's hizid b'Rishon is chayiv, only if it's lo hikiv b'Pesach Sheni. There's no koles b'hizid if you mark the Pesach Sheni, because Pesach Sheni is tashlumin, but Pesach Sheni can only pater. So if it's hizid b'Rishon, hizid b'Rishon, we'll see, but hizid b'Rishon, the hizid b'Sheni, he's chayiv koles, even without the hizid b'Sheni, because he wasn't marked with tashlumin. If it's hizid b'Rishon, v'shogeg b'Sheni, hizid b'Rishon, v'shogeg b'Sheni, he's chayiv koles for the Rishon, and he wasn't makriv the Pesach Sheni, which would have been a poiter. According to Rab Chanina ben Akiva, you need chiyuv amazing in both because it's one obligation. According to Rab Nosson, it's tashlumin, and the tashlumin with the chiyuv koles is a Pesach Rishon. But if he wasn't makriv, if he was makriv Pesach Sheni, it is the chiyuv koles. And if he was, and if he wasn't makriv, even b'shoigeg he's chayiv. But according to Rebbe, there's a chiyuv koles for both Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni, and he be chayiv twice koles. Shogeg b'zeh divei akol poto. According to Chinim and Tugit, this is the Akiva is a double portion because the chiyuv, because it's one conglomerate. So there was no Mazin in Gansen, and you need Mazin in both in order to be chayiv. According to Rab Nosson, he's not chayiv kohes in Pesach Rishon because he was shoygei, and there's no nafkamina if he was makiv and sheni or not, because sheni is only a tashlumin. It's not a separate chiyuv. Now here, according to Rebbe, if even if each one independently is mechayiv koles, but if you're shogging both of them, you're certainly potter. So you can be chayiv koles for the rishon and for the sheni. Okay. Now, here's the berishon v'shogag b'sheni l'Rebbe Rabbi Nosson chayiv l'Bchidin Retinus potter. According to China ben Akiva. According to China ben Akiva, there are 2 times to bring the korban pesach. That's one obligation. So if you're only chayiv if you're amazing in both. So here he's certainly potter. According to Abnoson, in Hizid Berishon v'Shogag b'Sheni, there's a possibility of tashlumin, but he wasn't makriv tashlumin. So he's chayiv because of the Rishon, and he had the option of being a plater to pater himself, but he didn't take advantage of it. Even if it was b'Shogag, it doesn't make a difference. According to Rebbe, he's chayiv for Pesach Rishon because of the Mezid, but in Pesach Sheni he's potter because he was a shogeg. But there's no tashlumin, but it doesn't make a difference. He's a Berishon, he's chayiv kolis. But he's not chayiv twice kolis, he's only once. Now, here's the important thing. This is the Ram here in Sefer HaMitzvos. In Mishnah Torah, the Ram is a different shita, and this is what we're going to explore. But before we explore this, the question is if there's a stira between Mishnah Torah and Sefer HaMitzvos, which one do we pick? So there's a tshuva of Rav Ben Rambam which he says in Ma'aseh Nisim, Siman Zayin, v'zeh asher hu b'chibo, it's a Mishnah Torah, hu ho'emes hamaskim l'svoros Rebbe, b'loi safek. V'zeh nismach, v'asher omar b'sefer HaMitzvos, b'hizid b'rishon, v'hikriv b'sheni, nistar me'asher b'chibo. So he says, what he says here in Sefer HaMitzvos, we're going over it, Met Hashem, there's a steel, kvar omar, ha'machabe, b'tshuva she'elois, ki kol ma shenimsa b'perush ha'mishnah, o zulosam b'nigud l'chibo, lo yismachu ela al ha'chibo, ki hu yoisem beduktok mizulosai. So, Rav Avram ben Rambam is very clear, and he's talking about our case, and he says that whenever there's a machlokes Ram Mishnah Torah, wherever it is, the halacha is like Mishnah Torah. So he quotes the Rambam, but the Ma'aseh is the Tshuvas Rambam is talking about a stira between Mishnah Torah and Pirush HaMishnah. He doesn't talk about a case between a stira between Sefer HaMitzvos and Mishnah Torah. The tshuva is Siman Reishut Zayin. Hatshuva mashich kosavnu b'chibo hu anochon asher ein bo safek v'kach kosavnu b'perush HaMishnah v'zeh asher b'yedchem b'yodeichem hu hanuscha rishona asher yotze mitachas yodeinu koidem shdiaknu v'nimshachnu b'zeh hamayma Achrei ma shekosav Baal Sefer HaMitzvos, or Rav HaChefetz, Vutos Mitzido. So in Pirush Mishnah, in Madur Kamo, he was going after the Goyim but however, Bezeh Nimshachnu Acha. He's self-critical. He wasn't. He didn't think about it and work it through properly. ותקענו. פירוש המשנה, וכן באויס הנוסחה הראשונה, מפורש מפירוש המשנה, מקום מספר, כי יוצא בזה, כמו מצווה, כי יוצא בזה, כמו Aseh, Shelas וכולי, and he basically says about stealing Pirush HaMishnah and Mishnah Torah, and the Rav Ben Aram assumes that applies to all Sfos. Now, let's get down to business. The Rambam in Mishnah Torah is ready to accept. I think we talked about this last. We just recap it for a second. The Ram Mishnah Torah in Perek Hey passes a separate mitzvah. Talks about Tchiyas Shabbos because Tchiyas Shabbos is talking about a chiyuv. It wouldn't be b'tashlumin. But the Ram is ready to say that even according to Rebbe, Pesach Sheni patis, if he's mak of it. And it's not a separate chiyuv kolos. The chiyuv kolos is only for Rishon. And still, that's a big chiddush. Even though there's an element of tashlumin in Pesach Sheni, it's still one mitzvah in Mishnah Torah. That is his chiddush. I think we spoke about this last week, Barikos. Now, that's there. You look at it yourself. Again, I think I discussed it. In Perek Hey, Halacha Aleph and Beis. Now, that's now. When the Rambam quotes in Mishnah Torah the mitzvah shchitas Pesach Sheni, he adds that it's Derech Shabbos. In Hilchos Kol Pesach, Perek Hey, Halacha Aleph, Misha Hoyetomei, B'shas Shchitas HaPesach, She'ein Sheichten Alav, Oy Shehoy B'derech HaChoyka, Oynenes Be'oynes Acher, Oy Sheshogag V'lehikre B'rishon, Hari Ze Mevi Pesach B'Arboasa, L'chodesh HaSheni Bein Arbaim, U'shchitas Pesach Ze, Mitzasei B'fnei Atzmo B'derech HaShabbos. The Ram is mashma, it's very changing. He says, Ushchitas, that's an important line. Ushchitas Pesach Ze, Mitzasei, B'fnei Atzmoi, V'derech HaShabbos. The Rambam implies that there's some type of connection between Tchiyas Shabbos and Mitzvah B'fnei Atzmoi. So the Pesach Sheni is Kavur Zman, and we know that everything which is Kavur Zman is Derech Shabbos. So the Ram L'chayre is putting a cap on it. Not everything which is Kavur Zman is Derech Shabbos. Kavur Zman is Derech Shabbos only if it's a separate mitzvah. And that's the Ram says, since it's a separate mitzvah, therefore it's Derech Shabbos. And Lu Yitzur, it wouldn't have been a separate mitzvah, it's not Derech Shabbos. So l'chayr should come out that according to the other Tanoim, not Rebbe, it shouldn't be Derech Shabbos. That should come out. It comes out. Okay. Now, but Korban, therefore, Korban Li and Korban Shalmei Simcha, they're not Derech Shabbos because after, if you Korban Li and Shalmei Simcha after Yontif Rishon, which they're not Chiyuv, it's only Tashlum and not Derech Shabbos. Tashlum is not Derech Shabbos. Only separate mitzvahs Derech Shabbos. And that's what the Ram says in Mitzvah Aseh Nun Hey, that Noshim are mechuyev to be makriv Pesach Rishon, and their Pesach Rishon is Derech Eseh Shabbos, k'mo kol ish v'is v'Yisrael. Umi she'ova al tzivui zeh v'lo yikrivo, b'zmano b'meizid chayiv kolis, bein ish bein isha, ki kvar yizboye b'gmo psochim, she'Pesach Rishon choyvo l'noshim v'derech Eseh Shabbos. Kloima, hakovosa b'abosa, cholios b'Shabbos, k'mo kol ish v'ish v'Yisrael. Again and again, that the chiyuv, that the Chiyuv Shabbos doesn't depend upon Gvul Zman by itself, but it depends upon that it's a separate mitzvah. And there's a mitzvah. And if Noshim are not chayiv, it's not Derech Shabbos, you need a chiyuv. You need a mitzvah and a chiyuv. Okay. Let's now, next. Mitzvah Nun Ches. HaMitzvah Shmone v'Chamishim He shetzivonu le'achol b'sar Pesach Sheni. So now is a mitzvah of Achilas Pesach Sheni. Is a mitzvah, separate mitzvah of Akrovas Pesach Sheni, and is a mitzvah of Achilas Pesach Sheni. Bolel Chamisha also me'io al matzah umoro. Amatzah gamken. Excuse me. Amatzah mo v'omer yis'al boy gamken amatzah yachlu. That there's a chiyuv not only a Pesach Rishon amatzah mo, but Pesach Sheni also. Umishpat mitzvah zo gamken is boy b'psochim ubo r'shein anoshel chayoves boy bo ki kmo sheshchita eino choyvo lohen. Kmo shebi'alnu achilosai b'li sofek. That not only are women potter from makrovas Pesach Sheni, they're potter from achilas Pesach Sheni because they're potter from makrov. So again, the Rambam is a double portion that achilas Pesach Sheni is a separate mitzvah, minyan mitzvahs. So you could have said, no, maybe there's an obligation of achilas Pesach Rishon, but if you don't do it in Pesach Rishon, you can do it in Sheni or something like that. But since Pesach Sheni, Shchitas Pesach Sheni is a separate mitzvah, and it's not a separate way to mekayim the mitzvah. So if the shechita is a separate mitzvah, so the achila is also a separate mitzvah. So the it comes out that, let's say, according to Rab Nosson, that there's no separate mitzvah shchitas Pesach Sheni. So I could imagine, according to him, there's no mitzvah of achilu also. And that's what the Rambam is saying, because the Rambam, otherwise we don't understand the Rambam is talking. Ubora she'ein anosh chayav es boy, ki kamo sheshchita eino chayav lohen, kamo shebe'alnu, kain achilosai bli safek. So if you can only imagine, if women are not chayiv in Pesach Sheni, then the achil is certainly not a mitzvah, a separate mitzvah. The achil is only a separate mitzvah if the akrov is a separate mitzvah. That's what he basically says. And as far as Nashim are concerned, since they have no mitzvah, there's no of akrova, there's no mitzvah achila. Mitzvah achila is only if there's an obligation of akrova. It's from Pesach Rishon, a Pesach Sheni. But women are not obligated. There's no chiyuv for Pesach Sheni. For achilas Pesach Sheni. The Rambam counts Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni is 2 mitzvahs. But in terms of the mitzvah chila, but as far as the ashara of Noam Avusho, he only counts it once. And it's the same ashara for Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni. So the question is, what's the difference? Should it be all the same? So this is really not a problem, because the Rambam's opinion is that minyan mitzvahs, you need a mufurish and Torah shebiksav. And you can't machadish a mitzvah with something which no midas atera. So the ashara of Noam Avushal and Pesach Sheni is only derech midas atera. It's not mufurish and Torah shebiksav. So therefore, it's not a separate mitzvah, minyan mitzvah. In minyan mitzvahs, and that is the answer in the Chuvas of Avram ben Arambam in Siman Zayin. We write Omnom Masha Leimona Zal bePesach Sheni Al Toichli Menu Noam Avusho v'chulei v'okadayme Af ki abraise hichriza beferish ki nischabu. There is a lot by Pesach Sheni of Noam Avusho. Be'emes hoyroi la'akshes. It's a good question. Omnom me'asher hishrish zal the Rambam. B'Shir Sheni, the Rambam says in Shir Sheni that you need a mitzvah mefurish and Torah shebiksav. Ki loy kol hanilmad bi'echad midas atera loy l'noisai. Tipo akusha. So since it's learned in Yud Gimel Midas, so it's not minyan mitzvahs. The Rambam here in this mitzvah, in the mitzvah of Achilas Korban Pesach, Pesach Rishon, he mentioned that it has to be Bais Echod Yeyochel. Here he doesn't mention it. We have to know why. And the answer is very simple. Because Pesach Sheni is Motzinois, it's Chutz L'Chabulos. You can take it out. So there's no dinner by Echod. And that the Ram says in Hilchus Korban Pesach, Perek Yud, Alocha Tezvav. Now, okay. Now, next. And it's an old poshut that the moror is not a separate mitzvah because the matzah morim is only as much as the Pesach. It's not a separate mitzvah. As the Ram said in Pesach Rishon, it certainly applies to Pesach Sheni. Now, here, this is not going to be so simple. One second. Now, here is the mitzvah of chatzotros. HaMitzvah nuntes, HaMitzvah hatesha b'chamishim, hi shetzivonu l'skoya b'chatzotros l'mikdosh. Im akrobas kol korban mikorbanei hamoados. He shetzivonu, the mitzvah is tekua b'chatzotros in mikdosh. When you makriv the korbanos of the moados. V'amar yis'aleh v'yom smichaschem moadechem moshe rasechem ותקעתם בחצוצרות. Then later on, וכבר הסבויר, וכן אנחנו מצווים לזכור בחצרות בעיתות הצורך והצורות. So there are two parts of this mitzvah. There's a mitzvah of tkiya on Korbanei Achag, Yontif, Chodesh, and there's a mitzvah of tkiya on Beis Sorah. Kishenitzak Elov Yisrael, when we're crying out to God. Okay. From Yisrael, Chesavo, Milchama, Bi'atzachem, V'chuli Ha'atzarat. Now, so Sefer, the Seichel Yosha should be mechayev you to say, it should be two mitzvahs, right? There's a mitzvah of chatzotros. The mitzvah of chatzotros l'chera of shofar, of korban, and the mitzvah of chatzotros beis sorah l'chera are two separate things. And the Rambam seems to count it as one and puts it in the same basket when he quotes this mitzvah. We have to understand that. Now, it says, b'mikdash im akrobos kol korban me korbonei hamoados. Moados is a very strange term because we're not limiting it to the Gimel Golim. V'raya, it says Rosh Chodshechem. And it's not even clear that this is the translation, because it is true that Ibn Tibbet translates it as Hamoados, but Ibn Ayov translates it as Hazmanim. which could include also Ish Chodesh. And Kapach is Aprokim. And L'cheira, not knowing anything about Arabic or anything, but one would assume that their translation is better because the pasuk itself says Ish Chodesh, and Ish Chodesh L'cheira is not a moed. Unless you play around the pasuk Mishaya call a moed Lishba B'chuai. The Gemara says it's Ish Chodesh, but I don't know. I wouldn't say it. Okay, next. This is the last mitzvah of the mitzvahs which depend upon korbanos. Excuse me, Zman of Zmane Hashana and korbanos. We had the mitzvah of Riyah and Chagiga and Simcha, Pesach Rishon, Achilles Pesach Rishon, Pesach Sheni, Achilosai. And here also, you blow the shofar at a certain time during the year. If you take that assumption, then the chatzot is space, just an add-on. In Pasuk, it says the B'yom Simchaschem, U'moadechem, V'oshechotchechem, U'skatem b'chatzos. There's 3 times. There's Yom Simchaschem, there's Moadechem, and there's V'oshechotchechem. 3 times. So, Moadechem is the Gimel Gold. V'oshechotchechem is Rosh Chodesh, as it is now, Rosh Chodesh. But what does it mean, Yom Simchaschem? The 3 times, we understand 2, we don't understand the 3rd, and the Ram doesn't say anything about anything. At least here. In Sifri, there's a Machukas Tanoim about what B'yom Simchaschem is. In Ba'aloischa Piska Ein Zayin, B'yom Simchaschem, Elu Shabbosos. Am Nosan Oimer, Elu Tmidim. And this is the Girsa in all Kisvei Yad. And the Chinuch works with Rab Nosan. And therefore, the Chinuch writes in Ba'aloischa, in Mitzvah Shin Pei Daled, L'skoya b'chatzotros v'mikdash b'chol yom b'hakiv kol korban. So it's on everything. So, however, this is a difficult thing. So Rab Nosson says you have to do it every day. If you're chayiv to be tekei every day, what is the pasuk moisif in b'yom simcha u'moadechem v'oshechotchechem? There's a mitzvah every day. And that's the Chinuch says, Afo Pi It's very strange. He's meramis to this question, but doesn't ask it explicitly. He says, "Papi shehize akosu b'yom simcha umoyed v'loish chodesh lav dafka." Kilu, the tail is lav dafka, and Shema Yisrael, you have to do it every day. So, it's a very strange thing. The Rambam might be dealing with this question. The Rambam in Hilchos Klei HaMikdash va'oivdim boy Perek Gimel Halacha Hey b'mei hamoados kulam v'roshei chodashim hoyu hakohanim teikeim b'chatzotros b'shas hakorban b'mei hamoados kulam b'mei hamoados kulam v'roshei chodashim hoyu hakohanim teikeim b'chatzotros b'shas korban. So, to do a portion according to Rambam, there's no mitzvah on Shabbos. He doesn't pass on Shabbos, okay? And also, there's no mitzvah of b'chol yom. He doesn't pass on Amnosan. He doesn't pass on the Tanakh. He doesn't pass on Amnosan. So, he has the Gis Agra, the Sifri. And the Goyim learns that B'yom Simchaschem is the Gimur Golem, or Moadechem is Rosh Hashanah V'Yom Kippur, and that's the Ram says in Hilchos Klei HaMikdash V'Livnim Boy B'mei HaMoadis Kulam, not only Gimur Golem but also Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Now, so I just want to say one thing. That is exactly what one would have assumed, and I think it's mistaba like that the mitzvah is only on Gimur Gol, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, and Rosh Chodesh. But however, the Ram says in Hilchos Tefillin Musafim, Perek Vav Halacha Vav, you get the impression that the Kohanim are taken b'chatzotros b'chol yom. That's what Ram seems to say. That's what he says, I guess. The Ibn also talks about it there. It's Kedai, and it's not really for us, really. But I just want to point out that if you're interested, you should look at the Rambam in Hilchos Klei HaMikdash V'Livnim Boy, Perek Gimel, Halacha Gimel and Dalet also. Say that. And look at the Ibn also, whatever you like. But, it's not clear 100% what's going on, but it's not clear at all. Maybe they happen to do it, but maybe it's nothing to do with the mitzvah. And you have the question is why and what's going on. B'chatzotros, b'mikdash im hakobos kol korban, mikorbanei hamoados. Okay, we did that, and we discussed what now, next. Seichel al divrei Shalmeichem is the end of the pasuk. So whatever you're going to say over here, the Rambam has a very strange lashon. Let me just point it out to you. I don't want to say much about it, but this thing. The Rambam says, "Im hakrovus kol korban mi korban amor." This means every korban you makriv on the Gimel Regolim in Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, every korban requires chatzotros. So l'cheira, you can't say every korban, because the pasuk says, "Alo leseichem ve'azivche shalmechem." So you can talk about an oil and a shlomim, but you can't have on chatas atzibur. It can't be such a thing, because the Torah says, "Alo leseichem ve'azivche shalmechem." The Rambam in Uchos Klei Mikdash v'Oivnei Boy Per Gimel Alach Beis is of the opinion that Shira is a mitzvah. Is the mitzvah? It's part of mitzvah levilim. The avodas halavim consists of Shira and Nilas Adolases, and Shira is on Oilos and Shalmei Atzeres, Olas Sibon and Shalmei Atzeres. But Olas the Dovo that the tzibur is makir for Ketzah Mizbeach, I assume that there's no chatzotros, even on the Olas Ketzah Mizbeach. Because according to the Ram, we'll see later on that the chatzotros are part of the mitzvah of Shira. We'll talk about this in Mitzvah Hashem. And as you understand that there's no Shira on Ketzah Mizbeach, so maybe there's no chatzotros. We'll see. Mitzvah Hashem, believe that. I guess maybe we'll see. Okay, now this is a very strange line. ובבei אמרו shemitzayim b'chatzotros, and this is like coming from left field. Bei omru shemitzayim b'chatzotros is the Mishnah Rosh Hashanah, Per Gimel Mishnah Dalet, that the mitzvahs where it says shemitzayim b'chatzotros, but we don't understand what he's talking about. Because mitzvah b'chatzotros is talking about the chatzotros of tinios. And the Rambam hasn't mentioned chatzotros of tinios, and he's quoting a Mishnah Rosh Hashanah, and he mentioned tinios later. It's completely confusing. And the Mishnah is going on the chatzotros of tinios. And he hasn't mentioned that the mitzvah l'skoya b'chatzotros is based so. He's mentioned it later. And the mishpat over here is a little bit odd after that. He says, Ukvar, his boy, mishpatei mitzvah zo b'sifri v'rosh Hashanah v'tinios. So tinios, l'chayra, is about the chatzotros of tinios. Hashanah l'chayra also. So, he's talking about where the mitzvah is found, and he hasn't even mentioned the mitzvah yet at all. So here, it's very difficult because he mentions the Makar mitzvah, he hasn't even mentioned it. You know, it's about telling you what dinim are, it hasn't mentioned. So this you can mishaya that maybe it's a Torah Sefer and the lines were mixed up, and maybe she read it like this: "V'chein anachnu mitzuvim l'skor b'chatzotros, b'itois hatzorach, v'atzoros kishenizak elov yisale v'om yisale kizavoyo milchoma b'atchem u'bebeya omu." And the Mishnah Rosh Hashanah is pshat in the chatzros of tinios. Shemitzvos hayoim b'chatzros. The Kvar is boy mishvei mitzvah b'sifrim Rosh Hashanah b'tinios. And then it's beautiful, but you know it's assuming a Torah Sefer. Oh, that's it. Whatever. Now, Mitzvah Hashem will pick up. Next time we have to read the second. V'chein anachnu, let's just read it fast. V'chein anachnu mitzuvim l'skor b'chatzotros b'itois hatzorach u'v'hatzoros kishenizak elov yisala. If you read carefully, he's not necessarily saying that the mitzvah of it is a mitzvah of za'aka, but when we are zoyek, we should blow the chatzotros. So Mitzvah Hashem will pick up this part, the last part, next week.